Welcome to Retro Cars Forever, and welcome to my wheelhouse. Reliable cars that are a blast to drive that you can easily find for less than 10 grand. I'm Brad, and over the past few decades, I've been lucky enough to drive hundreds of cars in this price range and owned about a dozen. And I'm tired of other cheap car lists that don't take reliability, scarcity, or daily driving duties into account. And I laid down some tough qualifications beyond the 10 grand price ceiling. There needed to be plenty of examples out there for sale in good condition with clean titles. The cars needed to be fun to drive even before modifications. Here's a tough one. To ensure these would be fresh examples that could go the distance, cars for sale in this price range had to be readily available with under 100,000 miles on the odometer. Reliability was a key consideration, so I relied on multiple sources beyond my own experiences. That included Consumer Reports reliability ratings, owner forums, TrueDelta.com when available, and DashboardLight.com, which looks solely at powertrain issues, using data from millions of used cars. Ease of repair was important, as well as the affordability and availability of parts. I'm also only considering cars made after the 1990 model year for daily driving considerations related to reliability, comfort, and safety. And finally, I'm only looking at cars, not trucks or SUVs. But let me know in the comments below if that's a follow-up list that you'd like to see. So now, in no particular order, here is my list. If you're a fan of old school cheap speed, then you'll want the Ford Mustang GT from the SN95 generation. The GT means a dead simple V8 under the hood, which ranged from 215 horsepower when it was first introduced in 1994, up to 260 horsepower after an extensive redesign in 1999. That 1999 refresh gave the Mustang a new edge look, like this bright yellow car here, whereas the earlier cars like this rare Aztec Gold example have a rounder shape. I've owned both versions, and I'd personally recommend the later New Edge cars primarily for their improved steering feel and especially their extra power. Early stick shift examples of the GT needed 6.8 seconds to make the trip from 0 to 60 miles per hour, and that dropped down to 5.5 seconds with the extra muscle of the New Edge update. But around corners, both versions of this Mustang GT are a bit of a handful, due to a solid rear axle and ground clearance that's high altitude for a sporty car. But you do get rear-wheel drive with the limited slip differential, which means these Mustangs are perfect for hosting a rubber barbecue. And to my ears, even with the stock exhaust, these V8 Mustangs sound better than any other car on this list. While reliability is average, these Mustangs are incredibly cheap and easy to repair. But be warned, these Mustangs aren't very fuel efficient, and the seats are oddly positioned and shaped. And if you have the stick shift, the clutch pedal is stiff enough that traffic jams could count as leg press reps. But the high seating position makes the car easy to see out of, especially if you get the convertible version. Cruising along with the wind in your hair and the V8 burbling behind you is like feeling the spirit of the original 1960s Mustang for a fraction of the price. Now, if the Mustang is the muscle car on our list, then the next pick is the exotic. If you're serious about having fun, then the 4th generation Corvette is your ride. Introduced in 1984, the 4th generation Corvette soldiered into the 90s armed with an old school V8 that churned out a healthy 245 horsepower. But in 1992, Chevy upped the ante with the high-tech LT1, which pumped out 300 horsepower, the most of any car on my list. That LT1 can fling the Corvette from 0 to 60 miles per hour in the low 5-second range. Top speed was even more impressive. In Motor Trend's 1995 real-world test of new cars under $50,000, the LT1-powered Vette was the clear victor, topping out at 167 miles per hour. Cornering is fantastic as well, thanks to a low center of gravity, fat tires, and a front mid-engine design that blesses the C4 with an almost perfect weight balance. Of course, all that exotic car speed does have some exotic car downsides. Getting in and out is a literal pain thanks to high door sills and narrow footwells. And earlier years have a rough ride full of squeaks and rattles. I'd recommend focusing on later cars, which quelled most of that squeaky racket with felt inserts and had better overall build quality. Check out my C4 buyer's guide for more details. But C4s made in 1995 and 1996 are the cream of the crop because of the improved vented OptiSpark distributor, which can be a sore point for the 92 through 1994 model years. The basic powertrain has exceptional reliability, and the massive hood gives you amazing access to mechanicals. But remember, these Corvettes are complex machines with lots of electrically operated luxury features that can go wrong, so make sure you buy a car that's been well looked after. And that's easy to do because most C4 sellers are seniors who babied their Vettes. When it comes to transmission options, the Corvette of this era gave you two choices, a 4-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual. But only one of 4 of these Vettes had the stick, so it'll cost you $1,000 or $2 more to row your own gears. Thankfully, this is one of those rare cars where an automatic transmission doesn't completely kill the vibe, due to how torquey the engine is and how engaging this Corvette is as a whole. So if you want near exotic car style and performance for less than 10 grand that makes you feel special every time you go for a drive, then give this C4 a spin. Here's a stylish grand touring car that's something of a forgotten gem, the Crossfire. Crossfire! Crossfire! No, not that Crossfire. The Chrysler Crossfire, which came to fruition back when Mercedes and Chrysler were merged together. The Crossfire was actually built in Germany using the same platform as the excellent Mercedes-Benz SLK Roadster. But what sets the Crossfire apart is its concept car Art Deco styling. The looks were so unique that Sharper Image even designed a radio after the Crossfire. How many other cars can you claim that about? The Crossfire was available as either a convertible or a hatchback coupe. The handy dimensions coupled with rear-wheel drive means that handling is crisp, further helped by suspension tuning that was a tad firmer than the Mercedes SLK. The engine is a Mercedes-designed 6-cylinder that whips up 215 horsepower, and with the available manual transmission, is good enough to shoot the Crossfire from rest to 60 in around 7 seconds. Reliability is a bit of a mixed bag. Little things can go wrong, but the standard 6-cylinder engine is one of the best that Mercedes ever engineered, so the basic powertrain is quite dependable. Also, like the Corvette, most of these cars ended up as cherished toys of senior citizens, so most examples have been well cared for. And it's hard to buy a sweet handling car with more flash for less dough than the Crossfire. If you're looking for a well-rounded car that delivers everyday performance and luxury, then the BMW 3 Series might be music to your ears. This sweet 4th generation, codenamed E46, was available in a variety of tasty flavors: coupe, convertible, sedan, and my favorite, a wagon, like this example. Under the hood, you'll find several smooth and efficient inline 6-cylinder engine options, starting at a 2.5-liter making 170 horsepower, and at this budget level, going up to a 3-liter engine packing a 225 horsepower punch. Pair that 3-liter with the optional manual transmission, and you'll fly from 0 to 60 in 6.1 seconds. A 5-speed automatic with tap shifting was also offered, but per usual, I'd recommend the stick. No matter the version, you get BMW's expert suspension tuning with an agreeable ride and terrific handling, with steering and braking responses that put many proper sports cars to shame. Most of these Bimmers were sold with a sporty rear-wheel drive layout. All-wheel drive is optional, but it's heavier, more complex, and more trouble-prone, so I'd only recommend the all-wheel drive if you live in a snowy climate. And speaking of reliability, this is the car on my list that I'd be most cautious about thoroughly inspecting before buying. While the drivetrain is generally reliable, watch for plastic degradation in the cooling system. Prepare for electrical gremlins to pop up in the interior, and make sure to check that the rear subframe hasn't cracked or separated, especially on the higher horsepower models. And keep in mind that parts can be European expensive, so budget accordingly. But if you can find a well-cared-for example, the E46 offers plenty of options and pure driving bliss no matter where you're going. Let's say you're looking for a ride that's a little more wild, then stop right here and check out these supercharged twins, the Chevy Cobalt SS and the Saturn Ion Redline. The early and more affordable versions of these cars shared a supercharged 4-cylinder, whipping up 205 horsepower and a healthy 200 pound-feet of torque. All of these spunky little beasts had a 5-speed stick and a properly snorty exhaust note. And and with only 2,900 pounds to lug around, these GM twins were very capable performers. 0 to 60 miles per hour arrived in only around 6 seconds, and handling was sharp enough for track duty. Interior material quality is typical 2000s era General Motors, which is to say, not great. And unfortunately, the Saturn Redline inherited its goofy amusement park ride cockpit design from the base Scion. But as consolation, the Saturn gives you these unique clamshell rear doors for easier back seat access. And in both versions, the seats are very supportive both for daily use and for hard cornering. So check out these underappreciated pocket rockets if you want your life to be a little more supercharged. Here's another set of GM supercharged rides that are criminally underrated. The Pontiac Grand Prix GTP, Buick Regal GS, Chevrolet Impala SS, and Monte Carlo SS.
Green.
All 4 of these cars were built on GM's superb front-wheel drive W2 platform, renowned for its excellent structural stiffness and safety. Also renowned was the 3.8-liter Series 2 V6, considered by many mechanics to be one of the most reliable engines GM has ever produced. But it's the additional supercharger that gives this V6 the performance of a V8, enough to propel these family saloons to 60 miles per hour in the high 6-second range. That's even more impressive when you consider that the only transmission offered was a lowly 4-speed automatic. At least it's a smooth shifting and responsive unit which is reliably beefed up for supercharged duty. These supercharger models were top of the line and loaded with luxury goodies. And as you'd expect in a large American automobile, the trunks are supersized and there's plenty of room to stretch out and enjoy, even in the back seats of the 2-door versions.
Come on, man, go, go, go! You're never going to get by anybody this far behind us, go!
If you have fuzzy nostalgia for NASCAR of this era like I do, you'll love the Grand Prix or Monte Carlo coupes, which shared their rooflines with the racing cars, if nothing else. My 2004 Intimidator edition was one of the most surprisingly satisfying cars I've ever owned. Just be aware that these coupes have some of the heaviest doors I've ever dealt with. Of this group, the Buick is the softest sprung, so if you prioritize ride over handling, go with the Regal. As a bonus, the Buick also seems to have the best reliability record, though I strongly suspect that's mostly because of its more senior ownership base than any real mechanical differences. Again, there's little things that can often go wrong with these cars, such as power window regulators, and watch out for power steering rack issues. If you want even more power, it's worth noting that the later versions of these cars swapped out the supercharged V6 for a proper V8. Those V8s sound terrific and are a full second faster to 60 miles per hour, but they suffer from front-wheel drive torque steer, and they're not quite as reliable or as easy to fix as these earlier supercharged models. So if you want a cheap, handsome, and luxurious family car that can still hustle, give one of these supercharged sedans a good look. If you don't need to haul a family around, then let me recommend the Mazda MX-5, better known as the Miata. The first 3 generations fit nicely into this price category. The original NA with its iconic pop-up headlights, the round-eyed NB sequel, and the first few years of the 3rd generation NC. Generally speaking, as time marched on, the Miata got roomier, safer, and bigger, but also faster due to ever-increasing power. My own 1999 NB Miata was one of the best cars I've ever owned, but all Miatas have the same basic formula: rear-wheel drive, lightweight, an easy opening top, and an eager 4-cylinder engine that loves to zoom. All the ingredients you need for pure driving enjoyment, even at legal speeds. While horsepower is pretty modest, ranging from 116 to 170, the lightweight means acceleration times are decently brisk, with later cars hitting the 60 mile per hour mark in 7.3 seconds. Short gearing helps extract every ounce of available power, and shifting is a joy thanks to one of the slickest manual transmissions ever devised. Please don't even consider the automatic with this car. They're also paragons of Japanese reliability, getting great marks from Consumer Reports, True Delta, and Dashboard Light's powertrain ratings. Downsides: well, that sporty gearing makes highway driving tiresome, as the engine revs pretty high even in top gear. And if you shop at the big and tall store, you might not fit inside. I'm 5'10", so no problems there. And trunk space is also pretty limited, especially in the NA. But hey, at least you get a proper trunk, unlike the next car on our list. If you want even sharper reflexes than the Miata, the third generation MR2 Spyder is an absolute gem. It's truly one of the most smile-inducing cars I've ever had the pleasure of piloting at any price. But yeah, let's get the biggest negative out of the way. Storage is limited to a small pod in the front and a scant few cubic feet in cubbies behind the seats. That's the price you pay for the exotic mid-engine packaging, which gives Mr. 2 lower inertia around corners, endowing this little roadster with race car-like reflexes. It's so quick around corners that even GoPros struggle to stay on. The MR2's rearward weight balance also limits nosedive during braking, helping this little Sportster stop on a dime. And at only 2,200 pounds, the MR2 is even lighter than the Miatas of its day. Despite that, taller drivers will usually fit better inside the MR2's surprisingly comfortable and roomy cockpit. That's partly because the mid-engine design frees up floor space that's usually eaten up by a central driveline tunnel. Like the Miata, the MR2 has a simple and thrifty 4-cylinder that makes similar horsepower, 138 in the Toyota's case. 0 to 60 takes around 7 seconds, but with the engine working away just a foot behind you, it sounds and feels much faster, even if the exhaust sound isn't as spicy as the Miata's. The MR2's performance comes with the sterling reliability you expect from Toyota. The only real nuisance is a disintegrating pre-cat in the exhaust manifold on cars made before the 2003 model year, but thankfully this isn't too hard to clean out or swap. So if you're willing to travel light, this is a Spyder you'll actually want in your garage. Alright, enough tiny junior bacon cheeseburger cars. It's time for the full-size Baconator, the mighty Crown Victoria Police Interceptor, codenamed P71 or P7B in the last few model years. I loved every minute that I owned my 2007 P71. And that's because the Interceptor package transformed the cushy Grandma spec Crown Victoria into something that could actually chase down perps, thanks to a much different suspension setup and a bit more power, both of which were improved in these later model years. The indestructible 4.6-liter V8 engine was good for 250 horsepower and nearly 300 pound-feet of torque. While that's better than a standard Crown Victoria, the Interceptor is still no rocket ship thanks to its 2-ton heft and a 4-speed automatic. 0 to 60 takes about 8 seconds. Reasonable, but it's one of the slowest cars on this list. Despite that, the P71 still gives its driver a feeling of power and authority matched only by captaining a battleship. And even without aftermarket sirens or lights, nothing parts traffic like something that looks like it's being piloted by Johnny Law. As you might surmise, many of these Interceptors are so cheap to buy because they were abused by the boys and girls in blue.
Holy crap!
But the Interceptor was built to take a licking and keep on ticking. The base Crown Victoria was already designed for longevity with its above-average powertrain reliability and an old-school body-on-frame design. But the Interceptor's additional heavy-duty springs, cooling systems, and optional skid plates make the car even more unstoppable. They're even reasonable off-roaders, as we unexpectedly found out during another video shoot with our car years ago. Even still, during a test drive, I'd recommend listening carefully for any funky noises coming from the suspension or drivetrain to make sure the car wasn't abused too badly. And check the idle hour counter near the odometer. The lower, the better. With proper care, Crown Vics can easily reach the 300,000 mile mark without major issues. And if something does break, parts are as plentiful and cheap as Dunkin' Donuts. As expected with such a Leviathan, you'll find plenty of room inside to store luggage or alleged perpetrators. There are downsides to a car this enormous. Parking in tight spaces can feel more like docking, and these rigs are thirsty. Expect to average only around 15 miles for every gallon of regular fuel. But if you think big is beautiful, then you'll have a blast with the Interceptor. You might even feel the impulse to make a few citizens arrests against other drivers that are having too much fun. Say, that wrongdoer looks like they're having a great time behind the wheel. And that leads us nicely to the last car on our list. The Scion TC. Here's a great little funster that everyone kind of forgot about, but that means you can get it for a steal. Okay, not literally, don't be like that guy. Scion was Toyota's short-lived youth brand, and the TC was their sporty hatchback coupe that lasted for 2 generations, accounting for 40% of Scion's total sales. The TC shared its torquey 4-cylinder engines with the base Toyota Camry, with power for the Scion TC ranging from 160 horsepower in the first gen to 180 horsepower in the second. However, you'll have to check the records of the 2007 to 2010 model years from the first generation, because these years have oil-burning piston ring issues that led to a recall. Otherwise, these cars have the renowned reliability that you'd expect from a Toyota product. As for transmission options, tap-shifting automatics or traditional manuals were offered. With the stick, the TC could scamper from 0 to 60 in the mid-7-second range. Inside, the TC was packed with a surprising amount of standard features, such as a huge panoramic glass moonroof, a glass partition over the back, and reclining rear seats that are actually reasonably spacious. The downside of those generous features was weight. While 3,000 pounds is still reasonably trim, that was 250 pounds more than its chief competitor at the time, the Honda Civic Si. But unlike the Civic, which everyone remembers and covets, it's easy to find nice used examples of the TC with clean titles and low miles for under 10 grand, especially out here on the West Coast. So the TC represents a lot of car for the money. And that leads me to a list of honorable mentions. So let's start with the Civic Si and its Honda and Acura brethren. These cars are reliable, efficient, and fun to drive with their available slick shifting sticks and rev-happy VTEC engines. But demand for all these cars is high, and most people drove the snot out of them. So it's nearly impossible to find nice examples under our $10,000 and 100,000 mile ceiling. That is, unless you're willing to buy one with a salvage title. It's a similar story for the Lexus SC300 and 400. Highly prized Japanese cars are typically out of this price range and mileage bracket. I've personally driven every version of the SC, but the only one you'll easily find under 10 grand and 100,000 miles is the 6-cylinder SC300 with the automatic, which is just too tame of a driving experience to make this list. Still, these are luxurious, beautiful, and reliable cars. In fact, in my 1997 copy of Consumer Reports, the reliability of the SC was literally off the charts. But reliability dropped another big, stylish luxury coupe just below the bar, the Lincoln Mark VIII. While the handling around corners is best described as gooey, these are riots in a straight line due to a snarling V8 shared with the Mustang Cobra.
Lincoln Mark VIII, the luxury coupe with a 32-valve, 280 horsepower sound system.
Mint, low-mileage examples are easy to find for little coin, but they're complex machines with too many common issues, especially the standard air suspension system that's known to cause headaches. The Mark VIII shared its MN12 rear-wheel drive platform with a couple of other cars worthy of an honorable mention, the Ford Thunderbird and Mercury Cougar. The Cougar happened to be my second car and was unkillable despite my best ham-fisted adolescent efforts. The MN12 twins are simpler and more reliable than the schmancy Lincoln Mark VIII, but the V8 engines in the Cougar and T-Bird have nowhere near the firepower, offering only around 200 horsepower. Available only with the 4-speed automatic, performance is a bit lacking with these heavy and softly sprung coupes. If you want snappier performance, Supercharging came to the rescue for the early XR7 and Thunderbird SC, which were also available with manual transmissions. But these supercharged versions have become rare collectibles that also typically creep over our price and mileage cap. Speaking of American coupes, I bet a lot of you are wondering why the 4th gen F-body platform of the Chevy Camaro or Pontiac Firebird didn't make this list, and yet the Mustang GT did, despite the overwhelming performance advantage of the V8 F-bodies. First of all, these F-bodies are more difficult to service compared to the Mustang, especially when it comes to challenging engine access. And the V8 F-body twins will cost you more to purchase as well due to their relative rarity. However, the V6 powered versions of these cars are still worth an honorable mention. Mention. A non-supercharged version of GM's super solid 3.8-liter V6 was a base option from 1995 all the way to the F-Body's cancellation in 2002. These 6 cylinders produced 200 horsepower and were still pretty quick with the 5-speed manual. As a bonus, that lighter engine meant handling was more balanced than the V8 and you got better fuel economy. The 6th gen VW GTI, which ran from 2010 to 2014, is a worthy consideration that definitely blends comfort, performance, and utility. The GTI saw powertrain reliability that improved significantly during its 6th generation run. Even still, you'll have to watch out for notoriously weak timing chain tensioners on cars made before mid-2012, and the direct injection design means the intakes will need a carbon buildup cleaning every 100,000 miles or so. The Mexican-built Ford Fiesta ST is another hot hatch, but unfortunately suffers from numerous build quality and turbocharger problems. Many people do get lucky and don't have any major issues, so it's worth an honorable mention if you feel like rolling the dice. If you want a reliable little wagon, the zippy Mazda Protege 5 from 2002 and 2003 is worth a look. But with only 130 horsepower on tap, it needed more zoom to make this list. For you convertible lovers out there who are somehow not interested in the Miata or the MR2 Spyder, the BMW Z3 is worthy of a mention. This popular roadster just missed a list because it lacks the Japanese reliability of the Miata or MR2. Now, for a BMW, the simple little Z3 is about as reliable as you can get, but you'll still have to contend with annoying electrical, cooling, and interior trim issues. Despite that, we still enjoyed owning our GoldenEye spec Z3. The highway driving experience is surprisingly calm, and the styling is as classy as James Bond himself. Plus, the available 6-cylinder engine delivers much more power than the Miata or MR2's 4 cylinders, all the better to thwart those supervillains.
More power!
So if you want a Bond car on the cheap, and you can keep up with the extra maintenance, the Z3 is still worth spying on. Okay, a few quick mentions of some popular cars that didn't make this list or even an honorable mention, specifically because of chronic and expensive powertrain issues. These are otherwise fantastic cars, but I'd only consider them if you're a mechanic or if you're good friends with one. The 1st gen Porsche Boxster is an absolute blast to drive, but there's a litany of common issues that can unceremoniously murder the engine. Repairs can cost you dearly, not only because of princely Porsche parts pricing, but also the challenging engine bay access due to a lack of a proper hood. The spry and beautiful Mazda RX-8 has a unique rotary engine design that is unfortunately plagued with apex seal issues. A quick scan through any used car classifieds will reveal countless mint-condition Cadillac STS and Eldorados with low miles and low prices. But those powerful Northstar V8 engines have proved to be ticking time bombs that sink these otherwise impressive boats. Both the Mini Cooper S and the Fiat 500 Abarth are adorable European hot hatchbacks that are famous for how fun they are to pilot, but they're also infamous for terminal engine issues and generally poor build quality. And when problems do arise, expensive parts and tiny engine bays make servicing extra difficult. Of these, the 2005 and 2006 Mini Cooper S with the manual transmission is your best bet when it comes to reliability. But unless you gotta have those cute looks, there are other better built options out there. That's all for me, but now I want to hear from you in the comments below. Any fun, reliable retro cars that you think should have been included? And do you have experience with any of these cars, good or bad? Let me know. And thanks for watching and subscribing to Retro Cars Forever. We'll see you next time.